Hello everyone, today I'm going to be discussing Silver Thursday, which took place on March 27th, 1980. It involves two individuals, Nelson and William Hunt, otherwise known as the Hunt brothers. So let's get right into the story. So the Hunt brothers became very wealthy after their father died in 1974. He was a large oil tycoon, made billions of dollars off oil, and these two brothers inherited most of that money, and they wanted to use this money to invest in some things themselves. So going back to the early 70s, 71 in Nixon's presidency, the United States went off of the gold standard. So after this, the Hunt brothers feared heavy inflation, so they wanted to hedge against inflation by buying commodities, and more specifically, silver. So they bought millions of ounces of physical silver and silver futures contracts. And since they inherited billions from their father, they could buy a lot of this silver in cash, but they also took out loans from banks to purchase silver and the futures contracts, which will be more relevant later in the story. But they took out a lot of money in loans as well. So after they invested billions of dollars in silver, they actually owned around 1/3 of the total private silver supply at the time. And the private silver supply meaning all mined silver that was not in the hands of any governments. So in the hands of people, in the hands of businesses, all of that would constitute the private silver supply, and they owned about 1/3 of that. So since they owned so much silver at this time, they basically cornered the silver market. And by owning so much, there was less supply that people could have because they bought the silver and then took it off the market. And then that increased demand because people wanted silver because there was less of it. And then that together, those really increased silver prices. So after the price went up so much, the government actually imposed higher margin requirements in response to the Hunt brothers' silver buying. So they imposed these margin requirements on the banks that gave out loans, so that the people like the Hunt brothers, who were taking out heavy loans and then using those loans to purchase silver and futures contracts, could no longer do so. They would have stricter margin requirements, which means they would have to have more assets in their account and a higher value of those assets to continue taking out loans, which ultimately the Hunt brothers were unable to do. So the Hunt brothers got a margin call from the banks, and then this is ultimately what led to the price of silver to tank. And then at the bottom here, I did just draw out a chart kind of showing the timeline as to exactly what happened with the price of silver. In the beginning, in the early 70s, the price was about $1.85 per ounce of silver. And then that stayed pretty stagnant up until this whole Silver Thursday fiasco, which kind of took place in the late 70s. That's when the Hunt brothers really started to buy their millions of ounces of silver. And then, as you can see here, in 1980, there was a huge spike in the price of silver. It went up to about $50 per ounce at its peak in the 1980s, early 1980s. And then after that, right after that, when the margin calls started coming in, then the price of silver absolutely tanked. It tanked to about $10 per ounce right after the Silver Thursday on March 27th. And then it stayed here in 1981. It was about $10 per ounce as well. So it stayed around $10 per ounce right after that, that high of 50 in the early 1980s. So this kind of goes to show what happens if individuals can buy this much of the silver supply. And this is a great story just to learn historically. I think they really should make a Hollywood movie about it, something similar to The Big Short. That would be amazing if they could do something like that. But yeah, I just found this story fascinating, and I really wanted to make a video on it. So if you have any questions, let me know.